The rain had been falling softly all morning, painting the streets of Seattle in silver reflections. Inside her quiet home, Claire Matthews stood before her bedroom mirror, trying on clothes she hadn't touched in years. The room smelled faintly of coffee and lavender, the scent of a peaceful Sunday. She wasn't planning to go anywhere special, but for some reason she felt like trying something different. It had been a long time since she had done anything just for herself. She held up a beige miniskirt she had bought years ago, tucked away in her closet ever since. "I'm too old for this," she whispered with a nervous laugh. But a curious thought crept into her mind. What if I'm not? Life had been quiet lately. Her friends were busy, her marriage had ended years ago, and her days had settled into a pattern of coffee, work, and sleep. So she decided, just for a moment, to try it on. The soft fabric brushed against her legs, and she turned toward the mirror. The reflection surprised her. She didn't see a woman past her prime. She saw someone who had lived, who had known both heartbreak and strength, and who still carried a quiet spark. For the first time in a long time, Claire smiled at herself. She turned to grab a sweater from the chair when a knock echoed from the front door. Her heart jumped. She wasn't expecting anyone. She quickly looked around for something to cover up, but before she could move, a familiar voice called out, "Aunt Claire." "It's Ethan." Her nephew. Claire froze for a moment, caught completely off guard. Ethan Walker, her sister's son, had just moved back to town after finishing college in Oregon. The last time she'd seen him, he was still a lanky teenager. She hadn't realized how much time had passed. She hurriedly picked up her sweater, trying to decide whether to open the door or make him wait. Before she could call out, the front door opened. "Hey, Aunt Claire." "I brought tow." Ethan stopped mid-sentence. Their eyes met, and for a split second, everything went still. He stood there holding a box of blueberry muffins in one hand, rainwater dripping from his jacket. His expression wasn't judgmentally, was just startled, like he hadn't expected to walk into such a moment. Claire blinked, embarrassed but trying to play it off. "Ethan, you scared me," she said, pulling the sweater around herself, half laughing. Sorry. I didn't mean to just walk in." The door was unlocked. He scratched the back of his neck, looking a little red-faced, but trying to act casual. "It's fine," Claire said quickly, trying to sound composed. "You just caught me in the middle of wardrobe confusion." He smiled a little, still awkward. "Well, I definitely didn't mean to interrupt fashion hour." That made her laugh for real. The tension eased slightly. She stepped aside to let him in, and the warmth of the house filled the silence. Ethan set the muffin box on the counter, the smell of baked blueberries mixing with the scent of rain. "I thought I'd surprise you," he said, taking off his jacket. "Mom said you've been busy lately, and I wanted to drop by, say hi, maybe check if you needed help around the house." "That's sweet of you," Claire said, still feeling the faint rush of embarrassment. She gestured toward the kitchen. "Come on in. I'll make some coffee." They sat at the table as the coffee brewed, the sound of rain tapping against the windows. It felt strange and comforting at the same time. Ethan had grown into a calm, thoughtful young man. His brown hair was a little longer, his voice deeper. But his eyes still carried that same kindness she remembered from when he was little. He looked around the room, smiling. "This place hasn't changed at all," he said. "Still smells like coffee and old books?" Claire chuckled. "Some things don't need changing." So they began to talk about his new job search, about the city, about how strange it felt being back home after so long. The conversation flowed easily, though underneath, Claire still felt that quiet unease, the memory of how he'd walked in, how she had been caught off guard. But as the minutes passed, the embarrassment faded. In its place grew something lighter, a sense of connection she hadn't felt in a while. Ethan glanced at her now and then, his tone always respectful, but curious. "You seem different," he said suddenly. Claire tilted her head. "Different how?" He smiled softly. "I don't know. Happier? Like you're actually enjoying life again." Her laugh came out small and genuine. "Maybe I'm just learning too." He nodded. "That's good. You deserve that." Something about the way he said it's simple, honest touched her. She didn't know what to say, so she just smiled and poured them both more coffee. They talked for almost an hour. The conversation drifted from his college stories to her garden to old family memories. Every so often, Claire caught herself watching him with quiet pride. She remembered the shy boy who used to hide behind his mother at family gatherings. Now he sat across from her, confident and kind. When he finally stood up to leave, the rain had slowed outside. "Thanks for the muffins," Claire said, walking him to the door. "You didn't have to come all this way." "Wanted to," he said, smiling. "It's been too long. You always made this place feel like home." She looked at him, touched by his words. "You're welcome here any time, Ethan." He hesitated for a moment, looking at her as if he wanted to say something more. Instead, he just nodded. "See you soon, Aunt Claire." After the door closed, Claire stood there for a while, listening to the rain. The silence in the house felt different now, warmer somehow. She leaned against the door, letting out a slow breath. Her heart was still fluttering, not in a way that frightened her, but in a way that reminded her she was still alive, still capable of feeling something new and unexpected. She laughed softly at herself. "All this over a skirt," she murmured. She walked back to her room, catching her reflection once more in the mirror. The woman staring back looked thoughtful, maybe even hopeful. Claire realized the shock of the day wasn't about being seen unexpectedly, was about remembering that she could still surprise herself. Outside, the rain began to clear and faint sunlight broke through the clouds. The house felt alive again, as if it too had been waiting for something to change. Claire made herself another cup of coffee, sat by the window, smiled at the world outside softly, quietly, with a heart that felt just a little more open than it had that morning. And deep down, she knew something had shifted, not in a dramatic or forbidden way, but in the way life sometimes whispers to remind you you're still here, still human, still capable of being seen. That was the real surprise. The visit had changed nothing, and somehow everything. He stood at the doorway, frozen for a moment, unsure what to say. The air between them felt heavy with surprise, and she quickly turned, startled by his sudden appearance. "Oh, you scared me," she said, trying to laugh, though her heart was racing. He looked embarrassed, his eyes darting away, unsure if he should leave or stay. "Sorry, I didn't mean to. I didn't know you were here," he stammered. His voice carried both apology and confusion. She gave a small smile, trying to calm the sudden awkwardness that filled the room. She walked toward him, her steps slow but steady. "It's okay," she said softly. "You just caught me off guard." It was a pause, a silent second where both seemed unsure what to say next. Then she gestured for him to come in. "It's been a while, hasn't it?" she added, hoping to change the subject. He nodded, his shoulders relaxing slightly as he stepped inside. The soft light of the room reflected in his eyes, making him look both older and younger at the same time, older from the years that had passed. Younger because of the uncertainty still in his expression. They sat across from each other, a coffee table between them, and the silence stretched again. He noticed how the place looked neat but lived in, full of small details from her daily life. A faint scent of lavender hung in the air. "You've changed the place," he said finally, breaking the silence. "Yeah," she replied with a faint smile. "I needed a change. Sometimes changing your space helps you breathe again." He nodded, understanding more than she knew, for a while. They talked about small things, the weather, work, how fast time had gone. Yet beneath those simple words, a deeper emotion flowed quietly. She looked at him and saw not just the boy she once knew, but the man he had become. His eyes held stories, and his tone carried something gentle but unspoken. She could tell he was holding back questions. And maybe she was too. After a few moments, he asked softly, "Do you ever think about the old days?" She smiled faintly, her eyes drifting toward the window. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but I try not to live there. The past is a nice place to visit, not to stay." He smiled back, though his expression carried a touch of sadness. "Yeah," he murmured. "Still, it feels strange. Everything looks the same, but nothing feels the same anymore." Her heart ached a little at those words. She understood that feeling too well, the way memories could make even ordinary moments feel heavy. That's life, she said. It keeps moving whether we're ready or not. He looked at her, studying her face, the calm way she spoke, the small spark in her eyes that hadn't faded with time. You seem happier, he said. She gave a small, genuine laugh. I'm learning to be, she replied. It takes time, but I think I'm getting there. He nodded again, quietly admiring her strength. For a moment, they just sat there, comfortable in the quiet. Then she stood up. Coffee? She asked, walking toward the kitchen. Sure, he said. As she poured the steaming liquid into 2 mugs, he watched her move with ease. She looked peaceful, confident. It was like seeing someone who had learned to rebuild themselves piece by piece. When she handed him the mug, their fingers brushed slightly. Both froze for just a heartbeat, but she quickly pulled her hand back, smiling lightly to ease the tension. Careful, it's hot, she said, her voice steady. He nodded, pretending to focus on the drink. Inside, though, he felt a strange mix of warmth and guilt. The moment wasn't wrong, but it reminded him how time could change everything, how once familiar closeness could now feel fragile, delicate. They sat back down. So she said, tell me about you. How's life treating you? He sighed, leaning back. Busy, I guess. Work takes most of my time. Some days it feels like I'm just running from one thing to another. She nodded knowingly. You sound like everyone else these days. We all rush so much that we forget to live. Her words hung in the air, soft but sharp in meaning. He looked at her, realizing how calm she sounded, how deeply she had thought about life. I miss that, he admitted quietly. Just being able to talk like this. She smiled gently. So do I, she said. There was comfort in their shared honesty. The awkwardness from earlier had faded, replaced by something simpler. 2 people reconnecting after life had pulled them apart. Outside, rain began to tap against the window, filling the silence with a peaceful rhythm. She looked toward it and said, You know, I used to hate the rain. Now I think it's beautiful. It washes everything clean. He followed her gaze, nodding slightly. Maybe we all need a little rain sometimes, he said. Their eyes met, and for a moment, they both felt a strange sense of peace. The conversation drifted to family memories and the funny moments they had once shared. Laughter came easier now. It wasn't forced. It was real. He told her about a small mistake at work that had turned into a funny story. She laughed, shaking her head. You never change, she teased, still finding trouble wherever you go. Maybe, he said with a grin, but at least I'm good at laughing about it. That made her smile again, the kind of smile that came from old comfort, not confusion. As the hours passed, time seemed to slow down. The tension that had once filled the room had dissolved completely. He looked at her and realized how much he had missed this honest conversation. Warmth without judgment, the simple presence of someone who understood. She, too, felt lighter, as if some old weight had finally lifted. When it was time for him to leave, she walked him to the door. For a brief second, neither wanted to end the moment. It was good seeing you, she said softly. You too, he replied. There was sincerity in his voice. She smiled and added, Don't wait so long next time. He nodded, promising, though they both knew how unpredictable life could be. Still, something about this visit felt like a new beginning, not a closure. As he walked away, she stood by the doorway, watching the rain fall harder now, the city lights reflecting in small puddles. For the first time in a long while, she felt calm. Sometimes life brings back people not to stay, but to remind you how far you've come. And she realized that this meeting wasn't about the past, it was about rediscovering herself. Understanding that even awkward moments can lead to healing. She closed the door, her heart light. The sound of the rain followed her as she sat back down with her coffee. The warmth spread through her chest. Quiet reminder that not every unexpected moment is meant to break you. Some arrive just to show you how strong you've become. That night, as she looked out the window again, she smiled softly. Life had moved on, but it had also come full circle in the most unexpected way. And for the first time in a long time, she was ready for whatever came next. The following week moved slowly for Claire Matthews. Seattle's sky stayed gray. The air smelled of rain and her home felt strangely quiet. She kept busy working from her laptop, watering her plants, cooking dinners for one, but her mind wandered more than usual. Every time her phone buzzed, she hoped it might be Ethan. It surprised her how often she thought about him. Not in a strange way, just in that quiet human way people think about someone who brings warmth into their life. There was something about the way he spoke, how he looked at her with genuine kindness. He had a way of making her feel seen. Not as someone's aunt, not as a woman past her best years, but as a person with stories, with worth. On Tuesday morning, she found herself baking muffins, the same kind he had brought. "I must be losing it," she said to herself, laughing softly as she placed them in the oven. But it felt good to laugh again. Later that day, her phone rang. His name flashed on the screen. "Ethan Walker. Hey, Aunt Claire." His voice came through, cheerful as ever. "I was wondering, do you need help with anything around the house? I'm free today." Claire hesitated for half a second before answering. "Actually, the bathroom faucet's been dripping. I was about to call a plumber, but if you're sure, I'm sure," he said. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. She hung up and looked around her house like it was the first time she'd seen it. She smoothed the cushions, wiped the counters, checked her reflection. She didn't know why she felt nervous. This was just Ethan still. She wanted everything to look nice. When the doorbell rang, she opened it to see him standing there, smiling under the cloudy afternoon light. His hair was damp from the drizzle. His rolled-up sleeves showed the hint of muscle from his new gym habit. And he carried a small toolkit. "Hey," he said easily, stepping inside. "Still smells like coffee and calm in here." "Some things never change," she replied. Smiling back, he went to work on the faucet while she stayed nearby, offering him tools, towels, and conversation. The air felt light, filled with the gentle rhythm of water and laughter. He talked about job interviews, how he was trying to find direction after college, and how confusing adulthood felt. "You'll figure it out," Claire said softly. "You've got time. I wish someone had told me that when I was your age." He glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. "I think you've done okay for yourself." She chuckled. "Some days, maybe." When the faucet was fixed, he washed his hands at the sink and turned to her. "There, no more leaks." "Thank you," she said. "You didn't have to," he interrupted, smiling. "I wanted to help. You've done so much for everyone else. You deserve to have someone take care of you for a change." Claire didn't know how to respond. It wasn't just the words, it was the way he said them, the sincerity in his tone. She looked down, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "That's kind of you, Ethan." He leaned against the counter, watching her quietly for a moment. You should stop being so hard on yourself." She raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said gently, "you always talk about what's missing in your life, what you haven't done yet. But you never talk about what you've already built. You're strong, you're independent, and you make people feel safe. That's rare." His words hit deeper than he probably realized. Claire had spent years putting on a calm face, telling herself she was fine, convincing the world she didn't need anyone. But in that moment, his simple honesty reached past all of it. She tried to smile. "That's very sweet, Ethan. It's true," he said, his voice soft but steady. A quiet fell between them. The sound of rain began again outside, a steady rhythm tapping the windows. Claire turned to look out at the gray sky, her reflection faint in the glass. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. It wasn't uncomfortable, just still. Peaceful, but filled with unspoken feelings neither quite understood. Finally, she broke the silence. "You've grown up so much," she said. "I keep remembering the boy who used to chase my dog around the yard. Now look at you grown, thoughtful, saying all the right things." He laughed lightly. "Guess we both grew up a little?" That made her smile. "Maybe so." He checked his phone and sighed. "I should probably head out before traffic gets bad." "Course," she said, following him to the door. "Thank you again for the help, really." "Anytime," he said, slipping on his jacket. Then, before leaving, he paused and looked at her one last time. You know, Aunt Claire, don't let anyone tell you you're getting older. You're just evolving. You're one of those people who get more graceful with time. Her heart warmed. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You're becoming quite the charmer, she teased. He smiled. Only with the people who deserve it. When the door closed behind him, Claire stood in the silence for a long time. The faint smell of his cologne lingered in the air, mixing with the scent of rain and fresh muffins. She took a deep breath and sat on the couch, her thoughts spinning quietly. Something about that visit felt different, gentler, deeper. It wasn't about attraction or romance. It was about being reminded that someone still saw her, that her presence mattered, that life hadn't passed her by completely. For years, she'd gone through the motions: work, dinner, TV, bed. Her world had been safe but small. And then, in 2 simple visits, Ethan had reminded her of something she'd forgotten. That kindness and attention could wake the heart in ways she hadn't expected. As night fell, she went to her window and looked out at the wet streets, shimmering under streetlights. The city felt alive, as if whispering to her that new beginnings didn't always arrive loudly. They sometimes arrived as soft words from someone who cared. She thought about Ethan's smile, his voice, his way of listening. She thought about how life sometimes brings people back into your path not for drama or scandal, but to teach you something about yourself. And deep inside, Claire knew what the lesson was. She wasn't invisible. She wasn't forgotten. She was still capable of being seen, of being appreciated, of feeling alive again. The rain eased into a drizzle, and she whispered to herself, maybe that's all I needed. She turned off the lights, wrapped herself in a blanket, and felt something new settle in her heart peace. Not the peace of silence, but the peace that comes when a soul remembers its own worth. And as she drifted to sleep that night, she smiled softly. Because sometimes the most unexpected people walk into your life not to change it completely, but to remind you that you're still capable of feeling something beautiful. That quiet storm inside her wasn't confusion anymore. It was awakening. The rain had finally stopped. The night was quiet, filled with the faint hum of the city and the soft glow of streetlights reflecting off the wet pavement. Claire Matthews sat by her living room window, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. The warmth felt good against her skin. She stared out at the clouds drifting away and thought about everything that had happened these past few days about Ethan, his visits, his words, and how strangely her heart had begun to change. It had been years since anyone had made her feel noticed. Not in a romantic way, but in a real, human way. People usually saw her as the polite, dependable woman who helped everyone else. But Ethan saw more. He looked at her like she was still full of life, still capable of laughter, still worthy of being understood. That realization alone felt like a gift. She replayed their conversations in her mind, the quiet sincerity in his voice, the way he told her she looked happier, the way he reminded her to stop being hard on herself. Each word lingered in her memory, not as something dramatic, but as something deeply honest. She hadn't realized how much she'd needed to hear those things. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of thought. The screen lit up with his name, Ethan Walker. She smiled and answered softly. "Hey, Ethan." "Hey, Aunt Claire," he said, his tone warm and calm. "I just wanted to check if the faucet's still holding up." "It is," she said with a light laugh. "No leaks, I promise." "That's good," he said. There was a pause. "I just wanted to say thank you for today. I don't know. I always feel better after I visit you. You make things make sense." His words caught her off guard. "You don't have to thank me, Ethan. You're family." "I know," he said, his voice softer now, almost thoughtful. "But still, you're more than that to me. You've always been like a safe place." The line went quiet for a moment. Claire felt her chest tighten with emotion, not confusion. Not discomfort, just a deep appreciation for the simple honesty between them. "You have no idea how much that means," she said quietly. They talked for a few more minutes about small things: his job search, her garden, the smell of rain after a storm. It was an ordinary conversation, yet it felt extraordinary. Every word was gentle, real, and meaningful. When they said goodnight, she stayed by the window long after the call ended. The night felt alive. The city lights shimmered like stars fallen to the ground. And somewhere deep inside, Claire felt something she hadn't in years, peace mixed with hope. She finally understood what had been building inside her heart. What had shocked her? That day wasn't Ethan walking in while she wore a skirt. It wasn't the awkwardness, or even the moment that followed. What had truly shaken her was something far more emotional. She had rediscovered a part of herself she thought was gone. For years, she had been living on autopilot, working, surviving, pretending she was fine. But Ethan's presence, his kindness, and his ability to see her differently had awakened something gentle inside her. Not romantic love, but a kind of renewal, a reminder that the heart never truly stops needing connection. She leaned back on the couch, closing her eyes for a moment. The rain outside had turned into mist. Everything felt still. She remembered how, when Ethan was little, he used to call her Aunt Sunshine because she always found something good to say, even when things were hard. Somewhere along the years, she had lost that version of herself. But now, she felt like she could find her again. Her phone buzzed, once more a message from Ethan. "You're the reason. I believe there are still good people in the world." Claire's eyes softened as she read it. She typed back, "And you reminded me the world still has warmth left in it." She smiled, set the phone down, and took a deep breath. The warmth that filled her chest wasn't about him specifically, was about what he represented. A chance to remember that life, no matter how lonely it becomes, can still surprise you with unexpected kindness. That realization changed everything over the next few weeks. Ethan continued to visit, sometimes helping fix things, bringing lunch, sharing stories about his job interviews. Each visit felt natural, like family. But something inside Claire had shifted permanently. She started dressing up again, not for anyone else, but for herself. She began painting again, a hobby she'd abandoned years ago. She even joined a small community club for women her age. Life began to glow again in quiet, beautiful ways. One evening, as they sat together on her porch, Ethan turned to her and said, "You seem lighter these days, like you found something you lost." She smiled. "Maybe I just remembered who I was." Aki nodded. "Good, you deserve that." They both sat in silence after that, watching the sunset melt into soft colors. The world felt peaceful. That night after he left, Claire realized how far she had come from that first unexpected moment when he had walked in on her. What started as a moment of embarrassment had turned into something deeply meaningful, a wake-up call from the universe reminding her that she was still alive, still capable of joy, still worth being seen. As she prepared for bed, she looked in the mirror one last time. The woman looking back at her wasn't the same as before. There was a softness in her eyes now, a quiet confidence. The mini skirt she had once been embarrassed to wear still hung on the chair, untouched since that day. She picked it up and smiled. It wasn't about the skirt anymore. It was about the courage to face herself, to be seen without shame, to realize that beauty doesn't fade with age, it changes shape, deepens, grows wiser. Claire placed the skirt gently in her closet and whispered to herself, "Maybe it's time to stop hiding." Sighed. The rain started again, light and soothing. She turned off the lights, crawled into bed, and listened to it. Her heart felt calm, her mind clear. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. She didn't feel invisible. She simply felt human again, and as she drifted to sleep, a final thought crossed her mind. Sometimes life sends people into your world not to stay forever, but to remind you of your own worth. Ethan had done just that, walked into her house, into her memories, and quietly helped her rediscover herself. It wasn't love in the romantic sense. It was something deeper, a bridge back to herself. The next morning, she woke to sunlight streaming through the window. The rain had washed the city clean. She made coffee, opened the window, and let the cool air fill the room. Claire smiled to herself. What happened next, she thought, didn't shock me anymore. Because the real surprise wasn't Ethan's visit, it was realizing that even after years of silence, the heart can still bloom again. That was the truth of it. The quiet, gentle truth that changed everything.